Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back into the Fantasy Headliners. In today's video, it's all about them ball carriers, baby. What running backs have a shot to go in the first round of 2022 fantasy football drafts? I've got 9 guys on the docket today based off current consensus rankings, not my rankings, the consensus rankings. And we're going to talk about whether or not we would draft them at that position based on their current ranking. So we're going to be breaking down 9 running backs individually, talking about their situations, what scenarios we could see play out, and whether or not you should be taking a stab at these guys in the first round this year. Now, things are a lot different this year. For the first time in a while, the talk isn't really about first-round running backs. It's about first-round wide receivers. Many people are skeptical of drafting a running back in the first round because they're tired of losing their running back to injuries. So instead, they're taking a look at Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, maybe Stephon Diggs. Some of those guys in the first round, taking a look at them instead because they just don't want to deal with the hassle that could come with a running back injury. I've already talked about that in previous videos, why I don't agree with that. But again, today is going to be focused on which one of these running backs we're really going to want to prioritize. Do we want to draft them at their current consensus rankings? And what will that look like later on? So we're going to talk must-have or must-avoid. And the one thing that you must avoid this offseason, it's looking like freaking Bigfoot walking around out on the beach. So you got to head over to manscaped.com, code word headliners, and you got to do some must-have for their Manscaped Perfect Package. Order one for yourself today. Use headliners at checkout. You're going to get 20% off your entire order, and you're going to get free shipping. So manscaped.com, make sure you check that out at some point and get yourself ready to really be out on the beach the rest of the summer. But ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into it. Let's take a look first at what those 9 running backs are and whether or not we want a piece of them in drafts this year. The top 3 guys right now in terms of the expert consensus rankings. Give me a second while I throw up. Hate the word expert. Hate it. Don't call yourself an expert. You can't be you can't be an expert in fantasy football. Too many unknowns. But the top 3 right now. Jonathan Taylor, obviously. Okay. Christian McCaffrey. That's crazy to me, right? Am I the only one? Let me know out there in the comments. Am I the only one that's a little bit crazy to see Christian McCaffrey this high? We'll talk about that a little bit and why it may or may not be something that you should be taking a look into. Austin Ekeler, the do-it-all guy from last season, finally having his huge breakout. People giving him the respect that he deserves. Putting some respect on that name. Austin Ekeler right now ranked number 3 overall among all players. The 1.04, Derrick Henry coming off of that foot injury last year. You know, it's not really one of those breakdown injuries. It was one more of those fluke injuries. So I'm not really that worried about it. Dalvin Cook's current ADP is going to put him at 1.05. So Dalvin Cook right now going after Christian McCaffrey is a little bit odd because they're both injury prone. They both have their issues, but even Dalvin Cook has missed less time over the last couple of years than what Christian McCaffrey has. And honestly, he might play in a better offense. Najee Harris coming in at the 1.07. It feels like some people have cooled just a little bit on Harris because I know at one point people were talking about wanting to take him all the way up at the beginning of the first round, kind of dropping into that mid to late round value right now for Najee Harris. Joe, my baby Mixon coming in at 1.09, a tremendous draft day value for you there. Now, 2 guys just outside of the first round rankings, DAndre Swift at 2.02 and Nick Chubb at 2.03. Both of these guys just going outside the first round. But depending on who you have in your league, you could see both of these guys maybe sneak up a little bit, especially if you've got other members of Headliner Nation hanging out in your league and you don't know it, or maybe you do know it. You could see these guys sneak up into the first round a little bit more often, but tell me that isn't some amazing value right there for Nick Chubb. Oh, baby. So let's go over all the running backs. Let's talk about their ECR, and let's talk about whether we must have or must avoid them at that spot. And it's going to start with Jonathan Taylor, and I think we all know the answer here, right? We must have him. 1.01, we are taking Jonathan Taylor this season. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Really led all running backs last year in all major categories. I mean, there was nothing that Jonathan Taylor did last season that just didn't pop off the sheet, that didn't just make him look like the best running back in all of football. Dude was doing it all season long, helping out in the passing game a little bit. Would love to see some more of it. Probably won't. And of course, doing everything on the ground that he possibly could. So Jonathan Taylor, for me, heck yeah, we're going to keep him there. Led the league last year with 332 attempts. All right. Strong workload, but that's okay. Attempts of 40-plus yards last year. Also led the league. He led the league with 5 rushing attempts of 40 or more yards. The next closest people were Melvin Gordon, Derrick Henry, Devin Singletary, Nick Chubb, and Chase Edmonds. They all had 2. Woo! JT, baby. Don't hurt us. He had 1,811 rushing yards last year. The next closest person was Nick Chubb at 1,258. Like I said, absolutely decimated the competition last year. I mean, it wasn't even close. All of his stats just absolutely blew everybody out of the water. Also led all running backs and avoided tackles. The dude was just, he was a beast. So yes, Jonathan Taylor at the 1.01 still has a good offensive line. Matt Ryan, hopefully he's a little bit better this year than what Carson Wentz was last year in terms of just being consistent with his gameplay. If we can see that, it's going to be a big help for Jonathan Taylor this year, especially if he does lose a little bit of work in the passing game. I think I think they could look to maybe limit some of those touches in the passing game just to make sure that they're keeping him healthy on the ground and really start to utilize Nyheim Hines a little bit more often. So Jonathan Taylor, 1.01, absolutely must have for me. At 1.02, I'm going to avoid Christian McCaffrey at 1.02. Now, I'm not avoiding Christian McCaffrey altogether, and I'm not saying that he's a must avoid altogether, but he is, for me, a must avoid at the 1.02 because there are other guys that I would like to draft above him this year. Several of the guys on this list that come after him are the ones. Ekeler, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, all those guys I would probably be taking over Christian McCaffrey. He could come back to running back 1 relevancy, though, okay? If you draft him at some point in the first round, you could end up really looking like an absolute genius. Now, it was funny because in the comments of one of our videos the other day, someone tried to say that if you were drafting Christian McCaffrey in the first round, you were stupid. And I responded to him and I said, you probably don't want to be poking fun at anybody about that right now, because if he does end up staying healthy for an entire season, they're going to look really smart and you're going to look really stupid. So that's one of those things where, hey, if you want to spend a first round pick on Christian McCaffrey, you're doing it because you understand what could happen if he's healthy. You're taking that risk. There's nobody drafting Christian McCaffrey in the first round right now and saying to themselves, he hasn't really been hurt. There's nobody that's drafting Christian McCaffrey and not understanding that he's missed a majority of the last 2 seasons due to the injury, okay? So everybody knows that is drafting him. The people that are drafting him are willing to take that risk knowing that they might be getting a guy that was locked in stone, the 1.01. So now if you take a look at the 7 games that he played in last season, 2 of them he left early. Week 3 when he was originally hurt, and then in week 12. He ended up leaving early as well. Only played around 30% of the snaps in both of those games. To start off the season, week 1, he played in 89% of the snaps. In week 2, he played in 71% of the snaps. He came back after being hurt. He played in 49, 59, went all the way up to 90 again there in week 11, and then dropped back down to 36 after he ended up getting hurt. So for Christian McCaffrey, when you take a look at what he did last year, look at, some of the main healthy games that he had. First overall game of the season, 98 yards on 21 attempts, added another 9 receptions on 9 targets for 89 yards. And you take a look at a bigger game as well against Arizona that they won 34-10, 13 attempts for 95 yards, and then he ended up catching 10 of 10 targets for 66 yards in the passing game. So Christian McCaffrey has shown that, yes, when he's on the field, he's still a dynamic playmaker. And this year, it's going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial for that offense for Christian McCaffrey to stay healthy. And if he does, they're definitely going to be a lot more balanced. And then at that point, it's going to be all up to Sam Darnold and whether or not he can actually get the ball to DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson or Terrace Marshall Jr., any of those guys to really help keep the pressure off of Christian McCaffrey and give him more room to operate. So for me, if he's healthy, volume's not a concern. Now, efficiency, if he's not healthy, efficiency is a concern for me just because of how that offensive line could end up looking, even though they did put a little bit of work into that. And then also, is this a team that really can turn around from what they did last season? If they're going to be behind quite a bit, then you're going to have to hope that Christian McCaffrey gets a little bit more work in the passing game. But there's a lot of pretty good weapons there. I don't want to say really good, pretty good. DJ Moore is excellent. Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall Jr., he's okay. I liked him a little bit more coming out of the draft than I do now. But really, if they're behind a whole lot, that can hamper Christian McCaffrey a little bit, because one thing Carolina isn't going to want to do is run him into the ground this year in situations where it's not really going to help the team. So Christian McCaffrey at the 1.02, he's a pass for me. Austin Ekeler at the 1.03. Love me some Austin Ekeler. I'll take him all day there. Dude with an absolute huge breakout last season. I mean, that's what you love to see from Austin Ekeler. We talked about it last year before the season started, and this is a guy that in my dynamic running back rating the dynamic running back rating, if you don't know what that is, it's in the draft guide. My complete breakdown in the draft guide. It's exclusive content to that. You can't find anything like that anywhere else in the fantasy football world, so make sure you pre-order yours right now down below. I'm going to be releasing here in a couple of weeks, so get ready for that. But the DRBR has told us for the last 2 seasons that Austin Ekeler's efficiency and dynamic plays are off the charts. Off the charts. If he gets the volume, the dude is going to have an amazing season. And that is exactly what he did last year. Dude saw a bounce up on the ground in terms of rushing attempts, all the way up to 206 rushing attempts last season. His targets was back up to 94 after dropping with only 10 games played in 2020. So back up to kind of that season that we saw in 2019 that kind of put him on the map as a potential breakout when he had 108 targets and 92 receptions. But last season, he put together a season that is eerily similar to guys like a Christian McCaffrey, like we saw from Ezekiel Elliott when he first came out, from Saquon Barkley in his first couple of years, where it's a guy that does a lot of damage in the air, but he does a lot on the ground as well. The dude is balanced and he's going to help you all over the field. That is what Austin Ekeler did. Now, people were concerned saying, oh, if you give Austin Ekeler a whole lot of touches, he's just going to break down. He's not a guy that can be the main running back. He's just not built that way. Well, he went up to 206 rushing attempts this past season, up from 12. So the year before, when he played in 10 games and then got hurt, he was averaging 11.6 attempts per game. And people were like, no way he can keep up that pace. Well, boom, he went up to 12.9 attempts per game this past year, and he held up for 16 games. So yes, absolutely, Austin Ekeler can hold up to that type of workload. He already did it, ran for 12 touchdowns, added another 8 in the air. The dude's an all-around back. I would personally, if I'm drafting and I've got the 1.02, listen, because I'm a big Joe Mixon truther, I might just draft Joe Mixon for the heck of it. But especially if I'm in a PPR league, taking Austin Ekeler at 1.02, yes, give that to me all day long. Now, there might be some concerns out there, and some people might be talking a little bit about the way the depth chart looks there in Los Angeles. And I understand, yes, they did bring in Isaiah Spiller, and I like Isaiah Spiller, but Isaiah Spiller is a ground and pound dude. He is a guy that's going to be on the ground. He's not going to take a whole lot in the air away from Austin Ekeler, and he's going to be used to spell Ekeler a little bit. Give him some rest. Let him, take a few plays off if he needs to. Maybe sit a drive or two throughout the game and really keep him healthy, refreshed, and ready to roll. So for me, for Austin Ekeler, we're still jumping all over it, especially knowing that this is a division that is going to be very, very tough. And if it is that tough, then that means that Austin Ekeler will be on the field in a lot of situations where it's going to be passing attempts coming his way over and over and over. If you're skipping on Derrick Henry this year because of the injury, I'm going to have to let you know right now, I don't believe that is a smart decision. Because, again, the issue that he had last year with his foot, it wasn't like he just, dude wore down and just broke. No. The play that it was broken on is just one of those football plays that happen and could happen to anybody. Derrick Henry is still a guy that I am not passing up in any way, shape, or form, especially at the 1.04. I mean, this is a guy that some people last year were still looking at as a 1.01, even over Christian McCaffrey last season, even over, Jonathan Taylor wasn't being talked about that highly last season, but he was a first-round guy. Derrick Henry is a dude that was on pace last season to really do everything that he had been doing. In fact, it was being taken to another level. So we've seen his attempts per game go up every single year, from 7.5 his rookie season to 11 to 13.4. His first year having the entire backfield to himself, he had 20 attempts per game, ran for 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns. When people didn't think he could do it again, ladies and gentlemen, he doubled up on you and went for 23.5 attempts per game, 2,027 yards, and 17 touchdowns. And then when you didn't think that he could do it again, ladies and gentlemen, his attempts per game last year were all the way up to 27.4. That is right. Almost 30 rushing attempts per game. And this is an offense that over the last couple of years has gotten rid of A.J. Brown, has chosen not to bring back Corey Davis, has chosen not to bring back Jonnu Smith. Guys that were big game changers. I mean, you could throw Julio Jones in there if you want to, but it's Julio Jones, right? He didn't do anything last year. So for me, that isn't that big of a loss, but all the other guys were big losses because they were essential parts of that team. Now, they've done a little bit there. They tried to do some things in Tennessee to help out Ryan Tannehill and try to make this a little bit more of a balanced offense potentially, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of balance, okay? You still have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine coming in as a wide receiver there. You've got probably one of the best names in football, Racey McMath, Des Fitzpatrick. But other than that, you got a whole lot of unknowns. You drafted Treylon Burks in the first round, and you traded for Robert Woods, who's coming off an ACL tear. And you brought in Austin Hooper. Big deal. So this, to me, is a team that doesn't scream, hey, guess what, Derrick Henry, we're not going to give the ball to you 20 times a game. We're going to throw it instead. Nope, not happening. This is a team that with Derrick Henry, again, will run probably anywhere from 23 to 26 times per game with Derrick Henry. Buckle up for another big volume season. Dalvin Cook, like I mentioned kind of in the intro of it, Dalvin Cook at 1.05, heck yeah. I mean, you should be drafting Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey because if you're knocking Dalvin Cook for injuries, then you got to knock Christian McCaffrey. And if you are knocking Christian McCaffrey for injuries, well, Dalvin Cook's been healthier than Christian McCaffrey. Both of them have had injury issues. Christian McCaffrey, obviously, a lot more over the last couple of years than Dalvin Cook. And we know Dalvin Cook, if you draft him, you're going to be missing him for probably anywhere between 3 and 4 games. It happens every year, right? Since he's entered the league, 4 games, 11 games, 14, 13. He's always going to miss a few games per season. It's just how it happens. But the dude has 3 straight seasons of 1,100 or more rushing yards. His touchdowns last year did plummet quite a bit, but from the seasons before, 13 rushing touchdowns and 16 rushing touchdowns. And if you're looking at him in the passing game, if you're saying, hey, he's just not that great of a pass catcher, I don't know what you're thinking about, because he only had 5 less targets in 2021 than he did 2020. So if you're talking about that, then you're talking about a guy that, honestly, listen, his passing game work hasn't really disappeared. Now, he didn't have as many receptions. He didn't have as many yards, okay? Those are things that kind of took a drop down, but they were still involving him last year. And if you draft Dalvin Cook at the 1.05 or before, just draft Alexander Mattison later. Just handcuff him. Why miss out on 13 to 15 excellent games from Dalvin Cook and then just put in Alexander Mattison, who has always been a solid backup when Cook is out? Just take it. If you're going to be getting this type of value from Dalvin Cook, take it, especially if he gets back to some of those touchdown numbers. If he gets back up over 10 touchdowns this past year, then yeah, he's going to smash into the top 5 area of running backs, and you potentially are getting him in the middle of the first round. So congratulations on that steal right there. Najee Harris at 1.07. I'm still a little skeptical of that. I'm still a little skeptical of taking Najee Harris at the 1.07. Now, listen, I don't have anything against Najee Harris. I like him. I think he's a very good running back. I don't like the team around him. I'm not a big fan of what the Steelers are doing over there. Now, if you're a Steelers fan in the crowd listening right now, you're probably cussing at me. Okay, and you're going to comment down below, and you're going to say, Kyle, the offensive line is so much better, man. Absolutely love what they did. It's going to be 10 times better than it was last season. What are you talking about? Wait, pump the brakes, ladies and gentlemen. That offensive line was awful last year. So even if your offensive line is 10 times better than what it was last year, it's still not that great, okay? And this is a team that is now heading into unfamiliar territory without Ben Roethlisberger, all right? And yeah, Ben Roethlisberger, he was nothing to write home about towards the end of his career, right? But he's still a guy that demanded some type of a respect from the defense, all right? Defenses still had to respect Big Ben because he's made big plays his entire career. He's a guy he knows what he's doing back there. So you still respect that. You respect the past ability of what you've got from Big Ben, all right? But now we moved on, and we've got a guy that, Mitchie Biscuits, hasn't been that good during his career. Some Mitchell Trubisky truthers will be out there to defend him, and that's okay. But he hasn't been that great during the course of his career. I'm not interested in Mitchie Biscuits being the quarterback in Pittsburgh. You've got Pickett. You brought Kenny Pickett in, spent a first-round pick on him, kept the hometown Pittsburgh boy there in Pittsburgh, all right? And, what are we going to see from him? A lot of talk in the offseason about his hand size, things of that nature. Can we see from him what we saw? And again, I like Kenny Pickett. I don't have anything against Kenny Pickett, all right? So, because of all of that, all right, Najee Harris to me is a guy that, yes, he's going to get volume, but how big of a hit in efficiency could we potentially see this season? Also, that division, it continues to be a tough division, right? You've got Cincinnati there. They're obviously a lot better. Cleveland could be kind of turning a corner here, and it depends on what happens with Deshaun Watson. A little bit of rumors out there right now. He misses the entire year. That obviously could set them back, right? And listen, the Baltimore Ravens, they aren't going anywhere either. This is going to be a division where you're going to have to be throwing the football a little bit because you're going to be facing some really good teams. So for Najee Harris, if he doesn't quite replicate some of those pass catching numbers from last year, and we see him take a little bit of hit in the volume side of the passing game, that's going to cause some issues for his overall scoring. Now, if he goes out and absolutely balls, I would tell you right now that Najee Harris could be the 1.01 next year. If he has an absolutely excellent season, I think people are going to look at Najee Harris and say, I want that guy first overall next year. Absolutely could happen. But his numbers are very, very similar to a guy by the name of Joe Mixon, which if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, you know that I love me some Joey Mixon, baby. All right. At 1.09, yes, Please and thank you. May I have another? Give me Joe Mixon at the 1.09. Him and Najee Harris were very, very close. The one difference, though, Joe Mixon knows how to finish, baby, because he was getting in the end zone. 13 rushing touchdowns last year, added another 3 in the passing game, so he knew how to finish on the ground. He plays in a much better offense. Their offensive line this year is 10 times better. And when I say 10 times better, I mean legit, going from possibly one of the worst offensive lines in all of football to potentially one of the better offensive lines in all of football. You think Pittsburgh did some good things with their offensive line? You can't look at Cincinnati and tell me that they didn't do multiplied of that, what Pittsburgh did. All right. Their offensive line is going to be absolutely amazing this year. And yeah, they're going to throw it a whole lot, but they threw it a whole lot last year, and Joe Mixon had almost 300 freaking carries anyway. Oh, by the way, Joe Mixon is still only 25 years old. Yes. Well, I mean, he'll be 26 here very, very soon before the season starts, but he's only 25, 26 years old. And really, over the course of his career, he hasn't had that huge workload that a lot of people talk about and knock running backs on. Like when you talk about a Christian McCaffrey, when you talk about a Derrick Henry, when you talk about a Dalvin Cook, he really hasn't had that type of a huge workload in the past. I mean, he's never had 300 carries in a season. Last year at 292 was the closest. His only other closest one is 278. From 2017 to 2019, he was one of the healthiest running backs in all of football, barely missing any games during that time. Yes, he had the injury that limited him to 6 games in 2020, but then he bounced back in 2021 and played in 16 games. I believe the only game that he missed, he missed that one game, I believe, due to COVID. I might be wrong about that. I might be remembering wrong, but I thought it was due to COVID. But anyway, I mean, Joe Mixon, absolute breakout last year. And not only that, but a lot of people will say, the efficiency doesn't matter. The efficiency hasn't been good. They don't like the efficiency. Okay, that's great that you don't like the efficiency. But the one thing that you can't overlook is the fact that Joe Mixon has a better offensive line. And that offensive line has been one of the reasons why he hasn't been that efficient. So if we've done all of this to improve this team, and we've made this offensive line that much better, and you've got a great offense that you've got 3 wide receivers that can beat you at any point in time, anywhere on the field. You don't think Joe Mixon's efficiency is going to go through the ceiling this year? I tell you what, if it doesn't, if he's not one of the best running backs in football, if he plays 16 or more games, then I'll jump off the Joe Mixon train. But until then, I'm up there, I'm driving it. And the targets at the end of the season, went through the roof. 6 targets in week 16, 8 targets in week 17, didn't play in week 18, 5 targets, 7 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets over the course of the playoffs. 21 total targets over 4 games in the playoffs. You're going to give Joe Mixon 5 targets a game next year? Boom. Put me on. Choo-choo. Everybody get on board. If you're not on board, then I don't know what to tell you at this point. DAndre Swift at the 2.02. I'm going to skip on DAndre Swift. DAndre Swift, to me, is a guy that has a very, 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 very wide range of outcomes, and it scares me, ladies and gentlemen. This is a guy that could be a top 5 back. This is a guy that could fall way down into the 20s potentially if he's hurt and misses time. DAndre Swift, to me, is really kind of all over the place with that. Now, people point to the start of last season and say, well, DAndre Swift he was like a top 5 running back to begin the year last year. And people will point to that. What the problem is just like a lot of talking heads out there, they give you these stats that they cherry pick to make you feel better about them, but they don't give you any background on it. So let's have a little bit of background, all right? So for, through the first however many weeks it was, I think it was about week 8. Week 8 is where he was really going off. People were excited. Listen to his targets per game. 11, 5, 7, 6, 6, 7, 10. Listen to his rushing attempts per game. 11, 8, 14, 8, 11, 13, 13. Okay, so didn't get 15 attempts on the ground in any game. Listen to his rushing yards per game. 39, 37, 47, 16, 15, 21, 51, 24, 48. So he didn't rush. Oh, excuse me. He ran for 51 yards. He touched 50 yards one time over the course of that. Listen to his yards per attempt: 3.5, 4.6, 3.3, 2, 4.6, 1.8, 3.69. That's not good, ladies and gentlemen. His early season success was propped up solely in the passing game. So, if you haven't liked Austin Ekeler in the past and said, I can't trust Austin Ekeler because he only really works in the passing game, you got to say the same thing about DAndre Swift. He cannot be a first-round pick this year. He can't. I hope he blows up, because if he does, it means the Lions are doing something right. And as a Lions fan, I'm rooting for him. Okay? He did have two big games in Week 10 and Week 11 against Pittsburgh and Cleveland, where he went for 130, then 136 yards. But that game where he had 130 yards, he had 33 rushing attempts. 33 rushing attempts. He ran for 3.94 yards per attempt. And then he came back and had 9.7 yards per attempt against Cleveland the week after. But it was Cleveland. All right? So for me, that's an issue with DAndre Swift. And one of the reasons why I can't afford to go with him that early, me personally, I'd rather get him back half of the second round. Can I get him in the back half of the second round? If I can draft Jonathan Taylor, Austin Ekeler, Derrick Henry, somebody like that at the beginning of the first, and then get him at the back half of the second, yep, sign me up for that. I'll take it. Nick Chubb, oh my, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Nick Chubb is falling into the second round because people are still scared about Kareem Hunt taking volume from him. And over the last 2 seasons, we've done nothing but prove that perception wrong. Kareem Hunt does not affect the upside of Nick Chubb. Now, does it affect him being an elite top of the first round pick? Yes, that does happen. Okay. But it does not affect his ability to put together big plays and be one of the most dynamic, efficient running backs in all of football. He's been one of the top guys in avoided tackles the last year. He's been one of the top guys in broken tackles the last year. He's been one of the top guys in yards after contact over the last couple of years. He's a guy that is absolutely time and time again balled out, all right? He does it. The dude is just good. And if you want to complain that if someone out there, again, says that you are losing if you draft Nick Chubb, I promise you that you're not losing if you draft Nick Chubb. If you spent a first-round pick on Nick Chubb last year and you lost, it was not because of Nick Chubb. It was because of something else on your team. I'm sorry, but if you had a guy that ran for 1,259 yards and 8 touchdowns last season and you didn't win a championship because of that, I don't believe you for a second. You're full of ish, okay? You didn't lose because of Nick Chubb. You lost because the rest of your roster wasn't any better. Nick Chubb played in 14 games last year, so unfortunately he did miss some time. But hopefully we can get a full healthy season coming up, because the dude over the course of 14 games puts up entire season's work. I mean, since he's entered the league, his yards per attempt, 5.2, 5, 5.6, 5.5. The dude has averaged 5.3 yards per carry since entering the league. Dude's an absolute animal. He's an absolute beast. And now you can get him at the beginning of the second? Yes! Because just think of this. Think about this for yourself. You've got a pick in the back half of the first round. And in past years, that probably meant to you, I'm going to miss out on the top running backs. But this year, if Kupp, Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams can all go in front of you, if you've got like the 9 or 10, maybe even 11, if you've got one of those picks and all 4 of those wide receivers go before you, you're probably going to have a shot at a Najee Harris or a Joe Mixon. If you can get one of those guys, heck, maybe even a Dalvin Cook. If you can get one of those guys and then draft Nick Chubb at the beginning of the second, whew. Listen, as long as you don't mess up the rest of your draft, you should be playing for a championship this year. You should be playing for a championship this year if you get that draft. That is an absolutely incredible draft. Incredible draft. I love it. That's the type of start you could get this year. And these are all, All of them, all the running backs right now that are going to kind of be going in that first round area. These will change a little bit. Another one that didn't make it into this show, Alvin Kamara. And the reason for that is because he's got some pending legal issues out there that is kind of holding him up right now. So because of that, we don't exactly know what could end up happening with Alvin Kamara. I left him out of this one because of it, but wanted to go through the top 9 running backs. So in the comments down below, I need to hear from you. What do you think? Must have or must avoid? Leave me a comment. Boom. And let me know what you think about all of these guys. So for me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. Hit that like button for me if you appreciate the content. Leave me a comment down below. And of course, if you're new here at the Fantasy Headliners, you got to subscribe for me and stick around. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here for today. Have a great day, and I will catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.